we have got to start buttoning up our state boards of education. I do think that the Department of Education will be dismantled, rightly so, but our state boards of education need to be prepared. There's going to be a lot of money involved, and anytime there's a lot of money and there's children, the children will be exploited.
Welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few, USPI's weekly podcast that empowers parents to reclaim their children's education from government bureaucrats and social engineers, equipping you with the tools and resources needed to join the cause.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and today I'm joined by Rebecca Watson, founder of Fairhope Faith Collective, to discuss her recent article, When Schools Become Clinics, which tackles the alarming use of mental health services in the classroom. Before we dive in, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. And visit uspi.org to learn more and join the movement.
Today's episode is brought to you by U.S. parents involved in education. USPI's mission is to empower parents and local communities to break free from federal and national influences, thereby reclaiming parental authority over their children's education. For more insights from U.S. parents involved in education, connect with us at USPI on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspi.org.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and joining me today is Rebecca Watson, founder of the Fairhope Faith Collective, a grassroots community devoted to encouraging transparency, accountability, and family values in schools and local government. Rebecca is also an opinion writer for 1819 News, and a recent piece, When Schools Become Clinics, tackles the growing role of mental health services in classrooms and what that means for education and parental authority. Rebecca Watson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm excited about this interview, and before we get into your article, I'd love to start with you. So this is clearly an issue you care deeply about. Was there a personal moment or experience that first opened your eyes to what schools are doing in the areas of mental health and medical intervention?
Absolutely. My story is very similar to a lot of other parents. During COVID, we realized at the time we had lived in Washington State, and we realized that the teachers and the counselors had been discussing things with our children that we didn't know anything about. And it seemed like this LGBTQ plus ideology had just taken over our school. And I was the VP of the PTA, and I had no idea. I was in the school all the time. And so that really, really woke me up. And we ended up leaving Washington State. And after traveling for 2 years in the US, we ended up living in a little town called Fairhope, Alabama. And that's where we currently reside. And I thought for sure this is the most conservative county in the state of Alabama. I thought for sure that nothing like that would be happening here. However, my daughter attended public school, and she has since graduated. But I wanted to know what they were teaching in regards to the counseling curriculum. And in Alabama, we have something that is mandated by the state, which is called character development education. And social emotional learning is not a state standard. So I requested from the Board of Education via a FOIA to receive the counseling curriculum. And I received notification from the attorney for the school board telling me that I didn't have a right to see it, that it was confidential, and that it was copyrighted. And so that is what prompted me to continue to press further, because if they are teaching this curriculum to our children, then we as parents have a right to see it. And there shouldn't be anything that our children are learning that's confidential. And furthermore, everything in a school is copyrighted. So I started researching copyright laws. And when you are using something for educational purposes, it's then referred to as a fair use copyright, which means you can copy it for educational purposes. So I couldn't understand why they were preventing me from seeing this counseling curriculum. And so that is what started this. And I just started looking into who was providing this curriculum, who is the third party. And I found out that the district had to sign a contract with this third party saying that they would not show the curriculum to any of the parents, that the only people that were allowed to see it are the people that are teaching it in the schools. And mind you, this is curriculum that's on their little Chromebooks. So a lot of these parents have no idea what's going on. And at the time in the state of Alabama, all of this was opt in. I'm sorry, opt out. And a lot of parents don't understand the difference between opting in and opting out. And opting out means that you have to sign a piece of paper to get your child out of whatever it is that they're teaching. Opting in means that you have to sign a piece of paper to get them to opt into the curriculum. So this was opt out. And since this has happened, through persistent nudging of our legislators, we have some really great parental rights legislators here in the state of Alabama. Last session, a bill passed, SB 101, that makes any mental health curriculum opt in. So we thought, well, we're safe. Now we have opt in curriculum. And if you do not want your child to participate, you don't sign you don't have to do anything. Well, our school board just violated that law, and through an executive order from our state superintendent, well, it wasn't an executive order, I'm sorry, it was a memo that they received from our state superintendent. So every district in the state of Alabama received this memo that basically said that these counseling sessions are they're just something that every child needs to have, and so this is not part of the opt-in. So now they're violating the law based on a memo that the state superintendent sent out. So we have valid concerns for parental rights. And in the state of Alabama, we are one of the leaders in the country for parental rights. So if this is happening here, parents in other states without these really important laws, they really have to start paying attention if they're not already.
Wow, so that's very interesting. Yes, Alabama is much like South Carolina. It's considered to be a very red state. I live in South Carolina, so I can relate to the idea that you wouldn't think it would be there, and so many parents and taxpayers in my state and in Alabama too, I'm sure, feel like kids are perfectly safe when they are not. And so before we get to my next question. So what's happening now in regard to the school districts violating the state law? Is there any repercussions for that?
So we have been in touch with the legislators that passed this bill. And obviously, if you really want to make a legislator mad, you violate their bill. So they're very upset. And I have been told that they're going to come back this year for this session, and they're going to change the bill to 18. So what happened last year is that the age of consent was raised to 15. And so any child under 15 and under had to receive an opt-in. Now I was told that they're going to raise it to 18. So that means that any child K through 12 that does not receive an opt-in will not be able to participate in any mental health counseling. Obviously, we can't trust our schools. And if there's no penalties, like any legislator that's listening to this podcast, if you write a bill, please write in penalties. Otherwise, there's no repercussions. So I'm really hoping that this bill that's going to be amended has some teeth in it so that there are consequences if our public schools violate the law.
So they're talking about raising the age to 18. I'm wondering when this when they put out their letter saying that it was necessary for every child, therefore what didn't apply to the opt-in. Did they specify an age when they said that?
No,
So it's kind of odd, isn't it, that the legislators thought that was the solution?
I think, there was a lot. This was also a medical bill too.
Mm.
So it wasn't only about mental health. This
Right,
was, a lot of things to do with medical
right.
treatment. And so I think a lot of considerations went into this age of
Right.
consent. It sounds so cut and dry, but it was very complicated when you're thinking about, teen pregnancy. And I mean, there's just so much to consider. And, when you go to committee with a bill, there are negotiations that are generally made. So, um, it was originally at 18, they negotiated it down to 15. But I believe that now our public school superintendent, um, our state superintendent has proven that he is not trustworthy. And if our public school superintendents for each district are going to follow a memo before they follow the law, there's a problem. And so, as far as where I live in Baldwin County, I think they are reevaluating this curriculum. And my hope is that um, that they do away with it. And that, these districts, all across our country, we have so many different mental health professionals. We have counselors, we have social workers, we have psychiatric hospitals that come into our schools and service our children. So if they are so educated in the field of mental health, they can write their own curriculum. They can also send home handouts so that parents can discuss this stuff with their children at home too. Having everything on their little Chromebooks is very concerning because they're also collecting data on our children. And this is a specific, third-party program that they use across the state of Alabama. But the kids, they have a peer helper program, and it starts in third grade. And these children that are selected, generally, I've been told by the director of this, it's called Thriveway. The director of Thriveway, they're the ones who created this curriculum. And the curriculum is called PATH, PATH, which is an acronym. They start in third grade and they pick these children that are the leaders in the class, and they become the students that help their peers. They identify at-risk students, and adults are not involved in this. So if there's a child that's struggling, that child, the peer helper has been trained to assist that child. And if they can't assist the child, they go get an adult that can. And then they go to their Chromebook and they log into their little account and they report on what they did. And they don't use the student's name. However, the data that they're putting in there is being collected by this third party company. And then they're taking that data and using it to make their program look successful and selling it to other states. And it originated in Baldwin County, and now they have sold it to Arizona, New Mexico, and Mississippi. And we have never had so many issues in our public schools than we do today in regards to bullying, mental health issues, acting out, children who have literally no self control. They cannot sit there and listen, violence. And so, if these programs were so successful and whispering all of the mental health into our children's brains, whether it's suicide, anxiety, depression, how are you feeling today? Constant probing. If all of that was helpful, I don't know why the mental health crisis is getting worse.
Mm. Very,
Um, it doesn't make sense to me.
very good point. I agree. And, in my opinion, a lot of the mental health crisis that we hear so much about has been perpetrated by the government schools. I mean, what they're teaching children across the board has to have them totally confused. I mean, teaching them at very young ages, you don't even know if you're truly a boy or a girl, and all of this nonsense that they're teaching children, I think has created the quote unquote mental health crisis. And there too, I'm not sure how much I even trust the whole mental health crisis, because I believe sometimes they begin a crisis just so they can provide the solution. And that's exactly what's happening from the federal government level, especially, is we're seeing tons of money being poured into mental health options for government schools. So let's get into your article titled When Schools Become Clinics. So you argue that many schools are no longer just educating children, but they're acting as a de facto healthcare providers. So for listeners who haven't read the piece yet, what are the core concerns you're trying to make in this article?
So for the reason I wrote this article is because there was a company that offers telehealth mental health services. And so they did a study and they determined that Alabama was the lowest of the low in regards to mental health for their children. And then all of a sudden, every news, um, agency picked that up and they started reporting on it. And so manufacture the crisis and then get it out there. So everyone's like, whoa, what are we going to do? This is
Mm-hmm.
awful. Well, it's not even it's not coming from a neutral research party. This is a company that did it that will benefit from our children being sick. And I think that is probably, to me, one of the scariest things, because when you are the person that um, provides the solution, but your income, your, the way that your business operates only is successful if people stay sick, how can you trust the
Mm.
diagnosis? So when I said that we have psychiatric doctors coming into our schools, um, they automatically, and of course, this is with parental approval, but they'll come into the schools. The parents aren't there. They're providing psychiatric services to these children. And if our children are well, they don't make a profit. So they're given a medical pipeline right away. And in Baldwin County, they are currently trying to partner with a psychiatric hospital and give them one of our elementary schools that can hold up to 1,600 children. So when you are the solution and you make money off of it and our children are involved, that is a huge red flag to me. And I don't think that it's ethical. I think it's I think it's dangerous. And I think too, when, the Alabama Department of Mental Health has a list of 26 behaviors, and if your child just exhibits 5 of these behaviors, then they qualify for a psychiatric school. So we're talking sexual abuse victim, child abuse victim, dysfunctional family, attention deficit disorder. I mean, these are things that are not psychiatric. That's not a psychiatric diagnosis. And I think what has happened is such a detriment to people who really need psychiatric care, people that are mentally ill, that have like schizophrenia, severe depression, bipolar disorder. Um, the mental health psychiatric community has kind of lumped all of these things in together to where there's no difference between mental health and mental illness. And when you get a hold of children who are feeling everything all the time, and you start telling them that there's things going on with them, and you start telling them what's wrong with them and diagnosing them with things, um, it puts things into their mind, and they become part of this pipeline, this. And I'm not saying that all children, if you have a child that is violent and throwing chairs and stabbing their classmates, that is not those are not the children I'm talking about. I'm talking about a child who can't sit still. I'm talking about a child who maybe is going through, suffering a loss, who's just having a hard time. Life, because we're not teaching our children to be
Mm.
resilient. We all, they're going to go through difficult things. There are children that are living in poverty. There are children that don't have enough food to eat. There are children who don't have clean clothes. Um, but these are not reasons for them to go stay in a psychiatric school. Um, these are things that can happen in a child's life where they need to be encouraged and loved and motivated and expected to rise. Because once our children graduate from high school, that's what the world is going to expect from them. And right now, we have a whole generation of kids wandering around talking about their feelings. And I need a personal day. And in real life, that is not how the world operates. And our schools are borderline with reading, writing, and arithmetic. Our scores are low. And then they want to take mental health on too. Um, I just think that it's not the school's place. I think they're in over their head and continually can keep on hiring more and more and more people
Hmm.
to do all of this stuff. And we also have to consider the medication that they're giving these kids. There's no long-term studies. What is happening to their brains? And these medical diagnoses can follow them throughout their life. It can affect them if they want to go into the military. I mean, this is some serious, serious, um, serious stuff we're talking about. And yet they're just, what do these people, what do these psychiatric, facilities, what do they care? Because by that point, the kid's 18 and out, and now they're not getting money from them anymore. And so it's our children, especially the most vulnerable children, are being exploited.
So, when you and I talked before the interview, I was so intrigued by this whole subject. I've been following it, but I'd never heard of a psychiatric school. That has to be something new for our listeners. I mean, our listeners tune into this kind of stuff, and they know we've got a lot of problems just with the curriculum alone in all government schools, not most, all. But yeah, I had never heard of this idea of a psychiatric school. You want to just describe that a little more for our audience?
Sure. I hadn't heard of it either. So how we have children in our schools that have IEPs and 504 plans. And we also have children that are, just general education students that probably should have an IEP or maybe need a 504, but the schools are not accommodating that. They're saying that, oh, your grades are too good, so you don't qualify. Um, I've had so many parents here in Baldwin County reach out to me and tell me that their child is not receiving the services that they need, or if they have an IEP, they're not getting reevaluated if it's not working. So I received a phone call and text messages from a gentleman that used to be the political consultant, political strategist for our Board of Education, which is very odd because no other Board of Education I've ever come across or heard of has hired a political consultant. Um, and he asked me if I would go tour the psychiatric school in Mobile, which is just across the bay from Baldwin County, because Baldwin County wants to emulate that school. And I found it weird that he would ask me to do that because I am very outspoken being against anything like that. But I agreed to go. So I had a couple colleagues come with me. We toured the school, and it's basically it to me, they tried to make it as nice as they could, but it was like a prison for children. I mean, every single door was locked. The doors had special panel, or I'm sorry, the walls had special paneling so that there could be no holes put in the wall. It's very secure so that a child can't get away, run away, escape. They're not allowed to bring in backpacks. They're not allowed to bring in their own lunches. It was surrounded by, I think it was a 15-foot fence with padding at the top so that if they did crawl up the fence, they couldn't get, it was like the padding in like a gymnastics room. So they would just slide back down. It had a playground, a lunchroom, technology, just like any school, but it was definitely a lockdown facility for children that have, to me, it seemed like very high psychiatric needs. And so this political consultant said that they want to emulate that in Baldwin County. And we have a new elementary school that we just built in Loxley. And they want to take the old elementary school and give that to this psychiatric hospital. Because in Baldwin County, apparently we are in a mental health crisis. And so the part where it starts getting sticky is that we have this political consultant that works for the psychiatric hospital, Alta Point. So he works for them and he works for our Board of Education at the same time. He no longer works for our Board of Education. He has left since probably, I think, maybe like 4 months ago. But he has facilitated this deal between the psychiatric hospital school and our Baldwin County Board of Education. So what I understand the plan to be is, if a child just displays these 26 characteristics, then they qualify to go into the psychiatric school. And keep in mind that the schools know which children are on Medicaid. That's very important because, like I said, the most vulnerable are being targeted. Of course, children in poverty, children with single parent families, children that have been through a lot, trauma, whatever, they're going to have some issues. Those are the children that are being targeted. So they take these IEP and 504 kids and they're saying that they have to be in the least restrictive environment, which means they have to be in with general education students. However, that's not actually true with the federal law, but this is what they say in Baldwin County. Because now they're taking these children, they're mixing them all together. So you have a teacher and you're supposed to have a para as well, but that doesn't always happen. in the classrooms, but you have this teacher that's trying to educate the general ed kids and the IEP 504 kids, and they're at different levels and different behaviors, and the children aren't being punished either, meaning that you can have a child that has stabbed another student, assaulted a teacher, and nothing happens to that student. There's no repercussions. And it's happened several times in Baldwin County. And so I believe that they're manufacturing this mental health crisis so that when that school, they're going to lease the school, lease Loxley Elementary School, they will lease it to Alta Point for $1 a year. This is what I was told by the political consultant. And then they are going to have a clientele right away. They will have these children that they can, put into the school. Now, it is parental approval. You do have to have a parent that will sign off on it. But I don't know if these parents even knows what their rights are. I don't know if these parents think that is there another option for them. And keep this in mind too. We have already 3 other programs for children that need extra help. We have a special school for children that have behavioral issues. I mean, we have resources. Our annual budget is last year, $737 million. We have plenty of money and plenty of resources. So I believe that this psychiatric school is going to be a way that gets these children that are the troublemakers out of our public schools, puts them in the psychiatric schools, whether they're medicated or I don't know what's going to happen to them. But then you come over here to our public schools, and all of it's driven by test scores. And I've heard you talk about that. We have state standardized test scores. We have a report card that our schools get annually. And these are not just based on how well a student tests. This is like truancy. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's mixed up in this report card. So it's not just about how well can your kids read or do math. It's very, they take a lot of different factors and put it in there. So now you have these kids that are, the lower income, struggling, single parent families. Now the truancy rate's probably going to go down. The scores are going to go up. And in the contract with the principals and the assistant principals and the assistant superintendents, they get a bonus based on the grade that their school gets. So the higher the grade, the more money they get. So when I say our children are for sale, I mean that. And it's not just in one way. There are so many different ways that they are exploiting our children. And I can't, I want to have a solution. I have spent so much time researching this. What is the solution? Because I don't like to complain if I don't have a solution to offer. And the way that it's operating right now, the only solution that I have been able to come up with is get your kids out of public school. And it's very sad for me to say that, but
we say it all the time, Rebecca. We say it. We issued a report recently titled "Are Government Schools Redeemable?" And we go through all of the, not all of but the 5 major issues we identify that would be very difficult to overcome, especially in the short term. So in the meantime, children are being exposed to some things that are evil. Like you said, they're for sale. It's a very toxic environment. And we're not sure. In fact, we conclude that government schools aren't redeemable. We do give suggestions in the end of the report should someone be really determined to fix them, but they're like Herculean task. So yes, in the meantime, parents have to protect their children. They have to get them out. So I agree with you 100% on that. So let me
And I do want to
go ahead.
say, I'm sorry, I do want to say this. In Baldwin County, we have a very high percentage of teachers that have their master's degrees, teachers that are Christians, teachers that love these kids. And it's very different than where I moved from Washington State. Um, but they're leaving in droves because when you have good teachers that love your kids and want to teach, and their hands are tied because the district office and the school board is failing them, um, they will leave. And then what you get is the new teachers, the ones that have been indoctrinated, and they're coming in and and it even deteriorates even more because the reason that people around here put their kids in public schools because they think it's like a private school in the way that the teachers, they know these teachers. Everybody in Baldwin County knows each other. So these teachers, you see them at church. Your kids love these teachers. But what is happening is hurting them. You can't sit by and watch something that you love so much deteriorate and be happy. And so it's almost in the end, these teachers, I've had so many call me in tears. They're forced to make a decision, and for their own sanity, for their own mental health, they can't stay in these environments anymore.
Oh, well, I agree with you on that as well, and have said that myself many times when interviewed. When people ask me about the teacher shortage, they call that a crisis too. Well, that's another crisis that they have created, because you're right. The good teachers are leaving, and they're leaving in droves, and that's why they're having trouble. In fact, here in South Carolina, I interviewed a former teacher. She left for the same reasons we're talking about. And she said they're contracting with teachers or people from other countries. And here in South Carolina, in one of the school districts where she taught, was a very low income school district. And, I forget what the percentage was, but a large percentage of the teachers weren't even from this country. They're recruiting them from other countries because of the shortage. And
Wow.
these teachers from other countries may not even agree with what they're being told to do, or how things are. There was a lot of violence in this school district, and they're afraid to speak up because they want to be able to live in the United States, so they're not going to push back on their job. So anyhow,
Yeah.
great discussion. We're going to talk some more, but let me take a quick break. And when we get back, I'd like to ask you about the Fairhope Faith Collective, a grassroots organization focused on faith, family, and community engagement. Don't go away. I'll be back with my interview with Rebecca Watson right after this. Is the widespread drugging of children for ADHD driven by profits? Evidence suggests this is the case. Children prescribed amphetamines 2 decades ago are now adults continuing medication. The New York Times Magazine reports that the number of prescriptions for adults in their 30s has grown from 5 million in 2012 to 18 million in 2022. This large adult market benefits pharmaceutical companies while many users struggle with addiction and life problems. U.S. Parents Involved in Education supports policy changes that will overhaul the diagnosis and treatment of ADHD to reduce harm and dependency. We urge the Make America Healthy Again Commission to act boldly in this area. For more information and to join our movement, visit uspie.org and connect with us at USPie on Facebook and X. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and I'm joined today by Rebecca Watson, a writer and advocate who is sounding the alarm about schools operating far beyond their proper role, particularly when it comes to children's mental health and emotional health. So, Rebecca, what led you to start the Fairhope Faith Collective?
Well, see that there's a lot of parent organizations out there, and my faith is very important to me. And I I feel like when I originally moved here and I was seeing the things that were happening, it wasn't just the things in our schools. There was a drag show down in one of our little restaurants right downtown, very close to my house, where children were invited. There was a big gay pride festival down at the pier here in Fairhope, and this was a few months after I moved here. And so I went and spoke at a city council meeting, and I was contacted by Moms for Liberty, and they asked if I wanted to start a chapter. And I thought, well, why not? I mean, I really felt like people around here just didn't know what was going on anywhere else, because this is a little utopian town. It's very, very slow, and it's just beautiful here. And so it is very easy not to pay attention to what's happening in the other parts of the country, or even maybe 3 hours from our home. So I started a Moms for Liberty, and what I noticed was I was being attacked relentlessly because I was associated with Moms for Liberty. And so I thought to myself, this is not helping. I actually want to start something that is based on what I think. I don't want to be responsible for what another organization's doing in, Massachusetts or Florida. I want to do my own thing. And I got so tired of hearing Moms for Liberty, Moms for Liberty. I thought, I'm just going to start something and call it Jesus, because that way people will have to say Jesus 5,000 times a day. Um, and so I thought, you know what? I am going to just do my own thing. And so that's Fairhope Faith Collective was born out of that. And I'm not limited to what I can work on. I also am very involved in our public library here in Fairhope. They had a lot of very bad, inappropriate, sexually explicit material in the minor section in our library. And so I went to Montgomery and asked for their funding to be paused until they move the books. So they haven't had their library funding in, I think, 7 or 8 months now. And actually, on the 22nd of this month, the APLS, Alabama Public Library Service Board, will decide whether or not their funding is pulled for good, or at least for a certain period of time. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. And so I I work on a lot of different things, but I received a phone call. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was I received a phone call from the Moms for Liberty head lady, Tina Deskovich. And she said to me,
Mm-hmm.
why are you working on the public library? You're not supposed to do that. We only do school stuff. And so I don't really like to be told what to do when it comes to protecting our children. And it all matters to me. And it's all connected. And so at that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to do what God calls me to do, and not what anybody on the earth, an earthly person, tells me what to do. And so I believe that my purpose here is to just do the right thing. I will do what God tells me to do, no matter the consequences, no matter the repercussions, no matter if people hate me, love me, I don't care. Um, and so that's how this Fairhope Faith Collective was born. And I also wanted to, be part of something that was local. I think that's important. And I think it matters to people here because, there's many people that have lived here for generations, and there's people moving here from out of state. And I, of course, didn't find it from a Sunset Southern magazine or anything like that. We found it traveling. I had never heard of Fairhope. And so I love this place, and I love it for, excuse me, for different reasons. I appreciate it for different reasons than people who have lived here forever. Excuse me, sorry. And so if I can do anything to make it better, I will do that.
Well, good for you. I love that story. And you know, you and I had talked a little bit about that when we talked before the interview. And, you know, since that time, when you and I talked the first time, I think it's been a couple months now, probably, in my state, Moms for Liberty leaders are dropping like flies. And there's a lot of disruption happening within the organization. I even read a post yesterday where one of the main Florida chapters, which is where they started, the leader stepped down. So it's really sad. I think that that movement started for the right reasons, like a lot of good movements do. And I really think they grew really fast, almost too fast, where it was hard for them to keep up with. And so it's sad to see, but I think that I think you made the right decision. And I love that you love your community so much that you wanted to name your organization after your community. And then, of course, your faith, which is a priority in your life. So I
Absolutely.
think that's beautiful. I love what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I do have one more question before we get to another break. And you know, I talked about how we could just go however we wanted to in this conversation. We didn't have to stick to my design question. So I did skip over a couple that I'd sent you. Is before I ask my last question before the break, is there anything that you want to insert that I haven't covered?
Um, no, I don't think so. I'll if I think of something
Okay.
as we go along.
Absolutely. Just jump in, okay? So, I think another important question for our audience is for parents who are listening who may feel overwhelmed or unsure where to begin. And so, can you give them some practical steps that they can take right now to protect their children?
Yeah, sure. I would say number one, if you have a child in public school and you are worried at all, or maybe you weren't worried until you heard this, I'm not sure. But I think that going to school board meetings is very important. Understanding that we have human beings that are running our cities. They make mistakes, but also they like to be supported when they're doing well. And so it's not just about showing up and being angry, but it's about it being informed. And I think when I was young, um, and I don't know about you, Sherry, but we were always kind of taught not to question authority. So when
That's
you
right.
question a teacher or you have a question um, of an administrator, it shouldn't be um, a negative thing. You should have a working relationship and dialogue with your child's teacher, with your child's principal. And if you don't, and if you're not getting responses and you're being treated poorly because you have questions, that is definitely a red flag. And don't be afraid to ask the teacher questions. Don't be afraid to ask to see curriculum. You have the right to see what your child is learning. And as a matter of fact, it's your duty to know. And these Chromebooks can make it very difficult by, getting in the passwords and figuring all that out. How does it work? And where do we go? And there's a ton of apps on there. Um, I think that you have got to put your own phones down. As parents, we have got to disconnect from technology and make our children the priority. And so getting on their Chromebooks, seeing, what is it that they're exposed to. There's a lot of children that have, and I don't know what age this started for my daughter, it was in middle school. They have their own email addresses. And these teachers and principals can email your child, and you're not on the email. So you need to find out, do they have an email account? Are you checking their emails? What are they talking about? What's going on with the Google Sheets? There's a lot of Google Sheets going back and forth from teachers to students, surveys. What are they being asked? I mean, you would never just take your child and drop them off with a stranger and say, okay, whatever, I'll be back in 6 hours. When we take our kids to the park, when we take our kids to the mall, we take them to anywhere, we keep an eye on them. And we know their friends, we know their friends' parents. So this is no different. Just because there's a teacher or a principal or an administrator in charge doesn't mean that they're trustworthy. We just had an IT guy arrested for sexual abusing a child. I mean, these are human beings. So we need to always be aware of that. And so I would just say start with going to your school board meetings and making sure that you have a working relationship with your child's teacher and principal, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Well, I think that's great advice. And yeah, I mentioned that we need to take a quick break, but before we do that, I just want to circle back to your article again and the psychiatric hospitals, because to me, that's the most profound thing that we've discussed today. And so, what are your next steps with what you've uncovered there? I know you reached out to me, and you and I have talked about some collaboration on some things we can do to expose it. But do you have any other next steps you want to share?
So I am in the process of just raising awareness. I don't know if I can stop this from happening. And frankly, I we we're in the middle of we just right now this month we have people are qualifying for our school board races. So we have um three districts that are, or not districts, but three positions that are coming up, and Fairhope is one of them. And so I am hoping to make this a very big um, issue with our school board race. And
Mm-hmm.
I think raising awareness is probably where I have to be a lot more forceful. I, I'm still in the process of trying to figure out what to do. I don't know if this is, like I
Right.
said, I don't know if I can stop this. At this point,
Right.
I don't have a child in a public school. My youngest goes to private school. And so if the parents that have their children in public school are willing to stand up and start fighting, well, then we have some leverage. But
Right.
without the parents that are invested in these public schools standing up and taking the time to fight for our kids, um, you know, that's what we need. That we need parents. And so rallying the parents and raising awareness is where I am right now. And then I think I just pray. I pray about it all the time. And I think God is going to, he's already done so much. I mean, I moved to this little town. I didn't know a single person. And why would anybody listen to me? I don't know anyone, this is a very closed community. Um, and since I've lived here, it's um, almost 4 years. I have, um, done some pretty amazing things by the grace of God. And so I have all the faith that it's all about God's timing and God's will. And so, whatever I need, I know he'll provide.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so let me take another short break, and when I come back, I'd like to ask you two questions I ask all my guests before closing the show. Don't go away. I'll be back with my interview with Rebecca Watson right after this. The April 2025 New York Times Magazine article entitled "Have We Been Thinking About ADHD All Wrong?" exposes the record high rates of diagnosis and challenges assumptions about treatment. The National Institute of Mental Health conducted a large study comparing stimulant drug treatments with non-drug approaches for ADHD. Its chief investigator recently stated that after 36 months, the benefits of stimulant medication vanished entirely. He no longer supports stimulant treatment, admitting it is not helpful in the long term. This challenges decades of medical practice. U.S. Parents Involved in Education encourages parents to read this report carefully and to question drug-based treatments. We also hope the Make America Healthy Again Commission will enact new policies prioritizing safe, effective approaches. For more information and to join our movement, visit uspie.org and connect with us at USPie on Facebook and X. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and with me today has been Rebecca Watson, founder of the Fairhope Faith Collective. Rebecca, we close our show with two very important questions. First of all, what concerns you most about what's happening in education today, and what gives you hope?
There's so much government managing things that should be done on a local level, and that the parents are so disconnected from their children, and the children are so disconnected from, I think, reality. We have, we've got, if we eliminate the Department of Education on a federal level, then if we don't have our local or our state boards of education buttoned up, then we have no oversight on them. And then that trickles to our local boards of education. And so it's like we have got to start buttoning up our state boards of education, because I do think that the Department of Education will be dismantled, and rightly so. But our state boards of education need to be prepared. They need to, there's going to be a lot of money involved. And anytime there's a lot of money and there's children, the children will be exploited. And the money will always, it seems like it will always win. So that really is something that's important to me. But the connection, I think our kids today are so, struggling with, their mental health. And I hate using that term, but everyone is so disconnected. You have the parents on their cell phones, the kids on their cell phones. Kids are, it seems like in virtual reality. They're not playing outside anymore. Parents don't trust their kids to ride their bikes down the street alone because they're worried about their safety, but they hand them a cell phone with no parameters on it. And it's like, it's an inside out backwards way of thinking. And so I really, really want to challenge parents to put your phones down, to take your kids' phones, put them down, put them away, and talk to each other, have dinner together, connect as a family, because our children, that's not just something that would be a nice to have. They need that. And the older they get, they don't need it less. They need it more. So, I would just love to see that family connection strengthened.
Amen to that as well. So,
What
what
gives me
gives you hope,
hope?
my friend?
Um, People like you, people that, have the courage to put their own ideas of what their life looks like aside. I mean, I did not move here to do what I'm doing. I was going to drive my golf cart down by the bay and, eat lunch with my friends. This wasn't what my life looked like in my 50s. Um, so I think people who follow the Lord and they understand that this is not our home. We are not supposed to be comfortable here. And some of us are a little bit, have a harder task than others. And so I think, you and I and people like us, and there's a lot of us, connecting and feeding off of each other's energy and sharing information. And no matter what the outcome is, because it's not a win. It's not about winning and losing. This is a God mission. This is a mission field, and people go to different parts of the world and they're on mission. Well, this is my mission field. It just happens to be Fairhope, Alabama. It just happens to be Baldwin County. And so I think, having a mission, having a purpose, and living in love, love doesn't mean that you accept and tell everybody that, yeah, whatever you want to do is just fine. And that's kind of what has happened, I think. We've evolved to this. Love means that you affirm me and tell me that I can do whatever I want. And I'm saying, I love you so much, I'm going to tell you the truth of God. And so, obviously, really my hope is grounded in my faith. And so, that's where the root of everything begins for me.
Well, we certainly have that in common, Rebecca. And I just want to thank you for coming on the show. And you mentioned my courage. I thank you for your courage and your clarity and your commitment to protecting children and families. We truly appreciate your voice and your work. So tell us how people can connect with you and Fairhope Faith Collective.
Well, I have an email address, which is isaiah4031bc@gmail.com. And I also have a Facebook page, the Fairhope Faith Collective. And those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to be praying for your work there in Alabama. And I'm also going to pray that God might expand your tent pegs. And we'll talk more about that later. But thank you again so much for being on the show, Rebecca. I'd love to have you back on sometime in the future.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And thank you for all of the work that you do. And I will continue to pray for you and your organization.
Thank you, Rebecca. And to our listeners, if you found today's discussion eye-opening, please share this episode with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, and subscribe to stay informed. You can connect with us on Facebook and X at USPI and visit uspie.org to join the movement. Until next time, I'm Sherry Few. Thank you for your support of USPI and our efforts to unmask government schools.
U.S. Parents Involved in Education is a nonprofit coalition dedicated to restoring local control of education and parental authority. By empowering parents to reclaim responsibility for their children's learning and encouraging states to move away from federal influence, USPI seeks to create a culture where parents are the primary decision makers in education and schools support families without the burden of federal mandates. If you want to start a state or regional USPI chapter in your area, please visit uspie.org and complete the brief questionnaire in the chapter section.